This is the Texas Real Estate Podcast, episode number 1.
We're doing it the slow way, right? But what I found out is that you keep putting your rent back into your pocket each month, right? So it starts to snowball. So the second one's easier to buy than the first one. That's the part that, it excites me a little bit. And that's what kept us going. That's what will keep us going.
You're listening to the Texas Real Estate Podcast. If you're looking to build cash flow, break free of the 9-to-5, and take control of your financial future, you are in the right place.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Texas Real Estate Podcast where we talk about everything Texas real estate. This is episode number 1. I'm Matt Williams, and this is my co-host, Jeff Bateman. Jeff, how's it going?
It's good. Hanging out, gonna drink some beer, talk some real estate with our people.
The goal of this show is to help people get from 0 to 1, help people get off the ledge, get away from analysis paralysis, particularly in the Texas market, find all sorts of great different opportunities, and take action. The most important thing, of course, in getting started is reasonable assumptions and then taking action. Today, we have a very special guest on the podcast, someone that's near and dear to my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeff Bateman. So, Jeff, we just recorded the podcast. What are some of the things that you thought were most interesting about a podcast that we just recorded and what we're going to talk about today?
I felt like it was just a conversation that two guys were having. They were just basically just now getting started in real estate. And we just kind of talked about what we did and how we did it. And, I think this podcast is going to be for someone who's just now ready to start. They've got 0 houses or 1 house or inherited a house from somebody, whatever it is. This is definitely a beginner's podcast. And I think that's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to talk to people who are in the same position as we are. We're not gurus that have 50 houses and, we're you. We're you that's listening to us, who's deciding, hey, you know what, maybe this might be something I want to get into. And so we're going to have some conversations with people that do that. And I think that people like that are easily relatable, and I'm looking forward to it.
What we're going to do is help feed those initial steps and just give a lot of different perspectives on 0 to 1. And we're hoping to learn at the same time. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'd like to welcome the first guest, the one, the only, Jeff Bateman. Jeff is an investor in the Woodlands area. And when I first came out to Texas and was looking at getting into property investing, I saw a forum that was going on for my local area where people were talking about possibly getting together. And I said, hey, why don't we get together? And helped coordinate it a little bit. And Jeff, I think it's safe to say, was the most experienced guy at the table. And it was I just started picking his brain and thinking about how he was doing things. Because I was looking at off-market deals. I was looking at all sorts of heavy renovation deals, and I didn't have any contacts. I didn't have any background in construction. These are programming fingers. These are not construction fingers. And so I just don't have that background. And so having somebody that had a little bit of context into how to do something forward was really important. And Jeff had a strategy that was pretty unique to the market at the time. And that was...
just buy it. Just get it. Get the deal.
Right. So how did you make that leap when you first started?
So I kind of was going through the forums a little bit too, and one of a local investor reached out to me, and we kind of went and ate lunch. And I'd been listening to a bunch of podcasts, just like I'm sure everyone else does. They listen to a bunch of stuff and get all fired up, but I hadn't done anything. I just listened to a bunch of stuff and went and had lunch with him and had him put me on a little mailing list where I kept getting emails about things that were out there and about. And I drive by him a lot. And the very first house that we physically went and looked at, we put an offer in, and that was the first. I only looked at one house and we bought it. We just pulled the trigger right then and there. Paid $5,000 over asking. Thought it was crazy, but I'd never forget what he told me. Is he just said, well, when you look back on it, do you want to get the house? Is $5,000 going to change anything over a 30-year mortgage payment? There was 10 people probably looking at that house. We had to wait for someone to come out of the house when we were looking at it. There was someone coming in after we were. And it's not like it is now where everyone's overbidding. This was something kind of unique, and I felt it was crazy. But we got the house. And I don't think if I ever would have, I don't think I'd be where I'm at now, which is not huge, but we have 7 houses, but I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't have just taken that step right then and there and just done it.
Wow. So everybody talks about when you're trying to get the deal, you want to get it under asking. You want to get something off market. That's like how you make your money, right? The common logic is, or the common phraseology is, you make your money when you buy.
Yeah, I used to hear that a lot.
You went the opposite path completely.
Yep.
You went and bought on market over asking, and this wasn't a month ago when everything's red hot. This was how long ago now?
2016.
It's still a hot market, by the way. It hasn't, because if you had people that were walking in and out when you were trying to look at the place, it was already a bit of a cattle call, it sounds like. Is that fair?
It was, yeah. But it was just, I wasn't ready to go searching. I have a regular 9-to-5 job, and my wife has a regular 9-to-5 job. And this was going to be something we just wanted to start doing. I wanted to start buying real estate and holding on to it. And just, that's what I wanted to do. I like buying things. I like watching them bring money in. I like buy things and sell it. This was just for plan of holding. We just want to keep it for a while. So I wasn't concerned about if I, got it for $5,000 less, if I'm not planning on selling it for 15, 20, 25 years. It doesn't factor in my equation, and as far as getting it almost rent ready or turnkey, that's kind of what I was looking for, because I don't have time to run a construction crew. I don't have time to go through and do this. My simple strategy was just to buy a house that almost had everything done, that would rent out, it would cash flow, and then over a period of time, it would make money. People would pay down my principal, and that would be our retirement.
I think a lot of people look over the precipice of, want to get started, but I need to have a deal that has X, Y, and Z parameters. I've listened to 1,000 podcasts and heard 18 different strategies, but rarely do you hear someone say, okay, what I did was I just went out and bought something, understanding that getting started was more important than waiting. The best time to invest was yesterday. The next best time is today. There had to be something else to make it make sense. So you weren't cash flow negative. You knew that you were at least covering the expenses plus a little bit, right?
Right. I mean, it starts from a point of a good foundation. Before I have to, I'm married. All right. I got a wife. I got 3 kids. I got a mortgage myself. In order to feel comfortable doing this, you have to have my partner had to be along with me. My wife had to be along with me. And the way I'd easily sell to her is, and even myself, is, look, worst case scenario, right? We buy this house and we don't rent it out. Is the $900 a month house payment going to cause us not to eat? Is it going to cause us not to be able to live? And once you're at a stage where that wasn't going to happen, then it took all the fear out of it, right? It took the fear out of it, and there was no more excuses that were there. If it was going to happen, if something bad was going to happen, we were in a position that we could be okay with it. And so we were just an average guy. I run self-storage facilities during the day. My wife manages gas stations. We live in a pretty average neighborhood and live an average life. And, I just felt it was something that I could do, and I like to do it. And it becomes addicting. I'll tell you that much. It definitely becomes addicting. Once you get that first one and you're closing, and then the adrenaline goes away and you rent the house out, I'm immediately looking for something else, but
so true.
I think what we did also was a little unique is that, I don't look for, I tried a little bit, some of these, rehab ones or something that need a lot of work into it, but oversimplify what we're doing is we're saving up 20%. We're putting a down payment in, we're closing, we're saving another 20%. We're doing it the slow way, right? But what I found out is that you keep putting your rent back into your pocket each month, right? So it starts to snowball. So the second one's easier to buy than the first one. The third one's easier. Then once you get 4 and you're cash flowing, almost $2,000 a month just on cash flow, then along with the other savings that you've been doing the whole time, well, now it's easier to get to that 20%. And so that's the part that, it excites me a little bit. And, and that's what kept us going. That's what will keep us going.
Yeah, that snowball effect is real. And then when you were looking down the barrel of some of these initial cash flow, initial equity gain, initial pay down benefits, how did the tax benefit play into it for you? Was that a primary consideration? Were you saying, hey, I can start chewing off some of my W-2 taxes potentially? Or were you just looking on, hey, we're going to pay this thing down, we're going to get a little cash in the pocket and see how this works out?
No, I mean, I it might have been a little naive, but just doing quick numbers on it, I felt like the cash flow itself offset the depreciation. I mean, if I'm bringing in about $4,800 to $5,000 a month, and I can depreciate a house that's $150,000, 1/27th of the price, it almost offsets that income. And so, yeah, I definitely felt like it was tax-free income that was coming in. Yeah, and so I still do. I still to this day think it's tax-free income. And as you have more and more houses, then it doesn't really change anything. It didn't move me into a different tax bracket because I just keep depreciating the next house I have.
Got it. So then for people that hear that and they say, well, okay, I would love to have 7 houses. I'd love to keep adding these up, but I don't have time to manage all these houses. And if I have to hire a property manager, if that eats into a lot of my cash flow returns, and then I'm about to break even, and then the AC goes out, now I'm upside down. How do you consider, because both you and your wife work full-time jobs, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So managing 7 properties has got to be a lot of work, right?
No. I mean, we live in an age where this right here is my property manager, my phone. It's my beautiful wife right there. You know, if something goes wrong, my tenant will text me, right? And then my next text is to my plumber. Say, hey, this is Jeff, at my house on Kelowna, their garbage filter is not working, or whatever XYZ is. Here's their number. And now they contact my tenant and take care of it. If there's a problem, they'll call me while they're out there. But I mean, I'm not a handyman. I'm not by no means self-admitted. I also, used to hear all the scary things like someone's going to call you in the middle of the night and things are going to be bad. I'm not saying that none of those things ever will happen, but I don't plan on them happening. I mean, I'm not going to live in fear that something like that's going to happen. I just don't. It doesn't seem that difficult to me to do. Now, I understand that people being wanting to have a property manager. If you just factor that into your numbers and factor it into what your strategy is, then it still works out. And maybe if I end up with a lot more, I will do that. But for right now, it doesn't seem like it's a burden to be able to do. I think I got systems in place to be able to find a good tenant. I talk to all the tenants. I call their landlords. I talk to their job. I verify their job, and I feel pretty good about the person that I'm putting in the house, which doesn't guarantee nothing except make me feel good that I think I'm putting the right person in the house, right? But I mean, you have to start somewhere. I mean, if you keep putting things ahead of you, like making an excuse, well, why I can't do this, and why I can't do this, and why I can't do this. And there's probably people that told me that I was doing it wrong back then, or that isn't going to work, or whatever. But they may not have any houses right now, and so I'm okay to do it wrong. I'm doing it my way. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And I promise you, when you got 6 or 7 houses and an AC goes out, but you're bringing in $3,000 a month, it doesn't hurt as bad to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on an AC when you have that many on a monthly basis, because it's all the other houses paid for that AC, right?
Right.
And that AC is not going to go out every year.
Right. And so the classic advice is carry a certain amount for CapEx, where you put apart whatever 10%. For those who don't know, CapEx stands for capital expenditures. Those are your large expenses: roof replacement, AC replacement, like Jeff just mentioned. Now, does that scale up now that you have? Do you keep an increasingly larger pool every time, or do you set some sort of reasonable baseline that you dip from that you then refill with the assumption that you're not going to have 8 ACs go off at once? Right.
I mean, I don't keep scaling up. No. Granted, you have to have enough to pay the mortgages each month. So that is a certain amount you have to have it. To fork out all the mortgages before the payments come in. So you have to have that at least. But we've always kind of lived our life here recently with an emergency fund. My wife likes to keep it as high as she wants, and I try to dwindle it down a little bit to buy other houses. But but we do have a threshold that we don't go below, that we both feel comfortable with, so that if something does happen, I mean, in our younger days, something would happen, it would devastate you. It would be bad. So we as weird as it sounds, I mean, I listened to Dave Ramsey probably 8 years ago, and I may not agree with every single thing the guy says. He did one thing. He got me out of debt, and he got me focused on a better life. And so once you do that, and then you can start, I won't say taking more risks, but you feel more comfortable if something's going to happen. The emergency fund is very important. I don't, I'm probably a little different. Like I said, I'm just an average guy. You're an average guy, Matt. We talked, we hung out, we had some beers, we met with a bunch of people. You're way more analytical probably than I am, and I definitely am a numbers person, but I also don't. I don't put 10% to capex. I don't do all these rules. I just do. A lot of it's common sense. I just do some basic things and say, all right, this is gonna bring in and this amount of money, and the taxes are high in Texas, but if you factor all that in and you realize that all in at $1,000, and I can rent this house for $1,500, then I'm good. Let's move on. Let's move forward.
Very basic math, right? You're all in at 1,000.
Super basic.
You're bringing in 1,500, and if you're keeping a little bit of it around, so you can cover. If everybody doesn't pay for a month, you can cover that. If everybody doesn't pay for 1 month, and you have an AC go out, you're still covered. If there's some weird cataclysmic event, then you might have to look at other things. But a lot of people anchor on life-altering cataclysmic as their baseline entry point, and then it makes it tough to take action, right? And that happens with tenant screening as well. And I know for me, that was a hang-up. That was a big hang-up, which is particularly coming from California, right? In California, you hear horror stories of tenant-landlord situations, and you can have, by the way, you can have landlords that are that are trying to take advantage of people. I mean, you can also have tenants that are, what do they call, professional tenants that try to take advantage of people. And the problem is in certain areas, if you get a tenant in, like where I was, if you have somebody that you give the keys and they've been there 30 days, to kick them out can take more than 12 months if they stop paying you, and they can trash your house. And so I carried that ethos a little bit in when I landed. And certainly I think that's one of the things that you and I discussed in the beginning is I was afraid of getting some nightmare tenant in there. And, I had this sort of worst case apocalyptic worldview. Now, it isn't to say that you can't run into problems, but how do you try to do baseline filtering so you know that when somebody comes into your house, there's an odds-on bet they're going to be a reasonable tenant, they're going to take care of the place, they're going to pay their bills on time?
Well, I mean, I use a program to pull a background check and a credit check. I'll look at that. I created a form for myself to fax over to an apartment complex to find out what their pay history is. I'll even talk to the apartment manager or other current landlord and get some information in regards to how they were. I'll call and physically talk to the tenant. I mean, all this stuff takes 30 minutes. It's not like I'm spending hours or anything to do. I'll talk to them. I'll get a feel for them. And so far I've been lucky. I mean, our first tenant are still there. I haven't had any turnover. So it's been great to that point. So I can't say that could be everybody's, that it's always going to work that way, but I went into it assuming it was going to be good. I think that sometimes if you look to people, you have a good relationship with them. I mean, I take care of issues when my tenants have issues. I think that's super important. If I have expectations, they have expectations. Like I said, my day job is I operate self-storage facilities, right? So people pay us rent every single day. But they expect things to work, right? They expect the gates to work, the lights to be on, the doors to work, the security cameras to be on.
Right. So
they expect a certain thing for their money, and the same thing for houses. And there's really not that much that I need to do. I mean, if something breaks, I'll fix it.
You started in 2016 with your first house. You now have 7 properties. You have the same tenants in that you had in when you started.
Yeah. I do have one tenant. I did buy an occupied house from somebody, which I don't ever do, but this was my realtor and bought the house. And so I got a good deal on the house, and there was already a tenant in there. And so I knew he was going to be moving out. But the person who moved back into that is the same one. But yeah, I still have the same tenants in every house.
To some degree, there's luck involved in that, of course, in life circumstances, but also it probably speaks to the fact that you're not running anybody off. You handle issues quickly. You stay on top of your relationship with them. You have probably reasonable but firm expectations.
Yeah, and I think it's also, the houses that I have that we have are in, they're $130,000 to $170,000 houses in very decent neighborhoods with very decent to above average school districts. And those are kind of the houses I look for. I'm looking for that middle-aged house. they're not building any $130,000 houses anymore, right? And rents that are $1,300 to $1,600 a month is just slightly over a 3-bedroom apartment. So I just think that niche of that amount works perfectly. And when I first started, I would be like, all right, if I can find a $140,000 house that rents for $1,400 a month and it's about 1,400 square feet, it's all big ones, and and it'll all work out. Since then, the prices have gone up a little bit more, but the interest rates have gone down a little bit. So it almost works out. The cash flows are almost working out the same.
Yeah, I think $140,000 purchase price. Wow. I've had deals that I thought I overpaid for that, now I can't find anything in the market in that area that's less than 200,000. Right. I thought at 176, I was overpaying.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure I overpaid for every house I bought, except for the one I bought from my realtor. Right. According to other people, I overbought it, right? But I got the house. I won, and it's something, that's part of the game too, is that, I won. Am I going to lose over $5,000 over a 30-year period of time? I don't have a calculator in front of me, but that's not a whole lot of money on a 30-year on a payment that would stop me from getting that house, and I firmly believe that that's what got us started. And I think that anyone out there is listening right now that's thinking about, hey, you know what? I need to do this, just do it. Just go out and figure it out. Don't be naive, but you got to eventually make a decision that this is what you want to do, and factor in all the cons, but ultimately just get the house. There's probably people all over your area that'll be willing to help you through the process.
All right, so let's say I'm sold on that idea. I'm like, okay, I really want to do it. I got a little bit of reserve. I think I can buy a house. Everything seems overpriced. I guess I can offer over. The numbers seem a little tight. I think I can manage it myself. I'm willing to take the risk. How do I figure out who to talk to just get a third party to give me some insight? Meetups? Do I look on Bigger Pockets? How would Jeff stepping into this today start to put his feelers out to just sanity check any initial decision?
I guess I haven't really been big on going to meetings and stuff as far as big networking events. I've gone to a couple, and I always feel like I'm just a little guy in there, especially when I was starting. I'm just a guy, and everyone else is so much more experienced, and they're talking about these deals they did here and these deals they did there, and I'm just like, hey, I'm just going to drink my Bud Light and have a few conversations with somebody. And I had someone reach out to me from Bigger Pockets, and I appreciate that immensely. I just think that building small relationships, you built a relationship. There's a couple other one of us that sprawl off of each other. That if you can rattle things off, I do think having a real estate agent that is an investor helped me out immensely, because there's a lot of pitfalls that I would have no idea about that he was able to guide me through. And so I do think that's very important. I don't think that's one thing that I would do as an investor walking into it, is to move into a situation without a investor, without a real estate agent who also invests themselves, because I think that's they've been there, they've done that. You don't want to go to a lawyer that's their very first case, right? You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that defendant. Right. This is my first case. I went to school, but this is my first one. So I was fortunate that I found someone like that, and if anything else, was able to speak the language a little bit for me. And I learned a lot. I'm always looking to learn a lot and learn. So
the way you see it, then, and tell me if this resonates, because some people wanting to come in and buy something want to cut costs as much as possible. They want to find for sale by owner. They want to try to min max it, because they want these cash on cash to be as high as possible, right? Because there's a goal they're trying to move towards. Your advice would be, instead of potentially running against a pitfall that could derail everything, have somebody at your back. Be willing to essentially throw some expense on the line to be able to find the person that's going to be able to get you in the door in a way that's safe and reasonable.
Yeah, realtors for a buyer, there's really not much expense on the buyer side of it. To where it was a negative towards it. I used to think in my head, wait, I feel like I'm comfortable now with the situation. What if I went in and made an offer to this for this house and said I don't have a real estate agent? Would that make my offer feel more? Would it make it feel better? Would it make it appeal to the person more? I don't know if it would. I don't think it would, because I still think that the seller gets the full commission, right? Unless the seller's agent, unless they're willing to give up some money back to the seller, I think I lose a bargaining tool on my own, a chip on my own side, with my agent. So, um, I kind of equivalent to, trying to find the best deal and nitpick and do all this and drive all around to kind of like if you're going to a store and you need to buy something, right? Am I going to drive around to 8 different places trying to save $4 on an item? If I go to the first place and it's $33, but I think, you know what? I think I saw it online for 28 somewhere, or I saw it somewhere else for. Am I just going to drive around? So what if I drive around, right, and then I don't find it somewhere else? Now I want to go back to the first place and buy it again. It's gone. Someone else bought it before me. Someone else just pulled the trigger, bought it, and now I don't have a house, or I don't have whatever I was going to buy. I don't have the grill I was getting ready to buy because it's the last one now, and now I got to start my whole search all over again. So I think it's just real important that you got to be decisive, know what you want, and go for it.
Wow, isn't that the truth? I can think of a personal example where I was putting an offer in on a property that was, let's see, it was 170. It was already rented, and the rent was a little bit lower than I wanted. They were renting it for, I think, $1,400, right? And then again, today I would take this deal all day, right? But I took a minute to pause, and there was a counter, and I came in a little bit lower instead of just putting in the extra $5,000. This was like, I didn't take the advice that actually you gave me at the time, which is, just get the deal, lock it down. I thought, I think I give, like, instead of $5,000, I'll put $2,000 on it, or whatever mental gymnastics game I was playing to give myself the arbitrary feeling that I was getting a good deal that was purely contrived, right? This is just me wanting to feel like I'm negotiating for the sake of some need to win, I suppose, at the core of it. And I lost the deal. And now I can look at that same deal and I thought, of course, those numbers were inconsequential. Like, going back to your earlier comment, when you talk about the $5,000 over that you're going on these properties, which at the time was a bit of a clearinghouse, now is par for the course. How much have you made on appreciation on, if we were to walk through like a first deal, if you ballpark figures, that deal that you paid $5,000 on over asking?
Right. So that first deal is a good example. So I bought that first deal for $140,000 in 2016. I refinanced it last year. Okay. It appraised for $189,000. I pulled the equity out of it and bought my 7th house. So my first house paid for my 7th house on strictly appreciation. And there's obviously a little bit of equity buy down, but there's not a lot of equity buy down in 4 years. That $5,000 didn't do anything. So that decision from day one to do it and get the house, it's everything. I mean, you have to buy one before you can buy 50, right? Unless you buy a 50 house little package, but that's not what we're talking to. We're not talking to people who have enough money to buy 50
right out the gate,
packages, right?
Right.
We're talking to the guy out there who's got $40,000 and they're wanting to buy one house, or they got $100,000, they want to spend 2 houses or whatever it is onto it. The beginning people. We're not here trying to pretend that we know everything. I think that we're going to do this podcast, and hopefully, what I hope to gain out of it is just talking to a bunch of people like us. I'm hoping to learn something from people. I'm hoping to be able to share something with some people. It just excites me. I like being able to share things that we've done and look back on it and realize that different mistakes. And, it just gives me a sense of pride and accomplishment when I can talk to somebody else about something and they and then they do it. They buy a house, and then I feel like I'm buying it with them. I feel excited for them. I'm like, hey, how's it? I know you whenever you get one, I shoot you back a text and say, hey, this is fantastic. What did you do here? What you got there? And you'd shoot me back and say, hey, I got this house here. What do you think about this? Or I got that. And, have you got the inspection yet? Was the appraisal, just, it's that adrenaline rush you feel every time. I like feeling it for somebody else, because I feel like someone did that for me. I felt like my realtor guy, not to that extent, but I feel like he kind of lived it with me and guided me through it all and made me feel comfortable. And so if someone else feels that same way, they're more likely going to buy the second house or the third house.
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point, the goal of us doing this is you said it so eloquently. It's hard to piggyback on that and add too much more context, but I'd say the value of having other people that are in a similar place, that are coming from it, not necessarily that are late stage syndicators that have been doing things for 15 years, but have been able to step 0 to 1 and just stepping through the analysis paralysis, getting around the complexity of taking that initial action is so important because, like you said, it becomes addicting. It's hard to stop, particularly when you taste a little bit of success and it works. And what I found is, particularly as I've picked up additional houses and I continue to bounce things off you and get your input, what I find is that often this will sound a little weird. I just needed permission to succeed. I needed permission. I ran the numbers. Things looked like they made sense, and it looked right. and the categories all lined up. I just needed you to come up with a rubber stamp and say, "I agree." Whap.
I think we all need that in some sort of phase in all of our life. Everybody's in some sort of affirmation. You're always looking at, hey, does this shirt look okay? Is this shoes? This, that? I mean, sure, we're all going to do our things our own way, but it does feel good to figure something out, and then someone say, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." I mean, that's powerful. It's powerful to know that you did something and that someone else agrees with you that you did it. I mean, as small as it sounds, if I would have looked at that house and walked in and said, this and that, I'm like, well, there's a lot of people looking at it. I mean, is $140,000 going to get it? He's like, I don't know. And we had that conversation when I'm like, all right, well, let's do $145. $5,000 extra is only really $1,000 more in my pocket, and I don't want to make $1,000 seem like it's not much. But that's what I thought at the time. I'm like, look, if $1,000 more in my pocket means I get this house, then let's do it. And he's like, yeah, I think you're going to get it. So actually, I'll be honest, we did $145,001.
Oh, no kidding.
Now I'm thinking about it. We did because I thought, what if someone else does exactly $145,000? So I'm going to do $145,001, right? I don't know why I thought that. I just thought, maybe I'm used to watching a Price is Right thing and someone low bids down to $1. But I felt that $1 was going to mean something, or I think lately, even more recently, we've got like $145,100 or something like that. But, I think the big thing is you want to try to stand out.
Everybody, pro tip, at minimum $1, guaranteed success. You put money down, you get a certain amount of time to inspect the property, and you can back out for any reason without losing your earnest money, which is the money you put down when you are in earnest moving towards closing on the deal. And if you move beyond a certain window, you can lose that earnest money. Well, for option period funds, I just put a few $100s more than other people. There was a property where I think my offer was probably about the same as everybody else, but I put a $400 option period, which isn't a crazy amount of money. I don't want to trivialize it. It's money, particularly if you're getting started. It can be a lot, but I knew that I was committed to buying this deal. I wasn't playing. I wanted to get it across the line. And if I could convey that without putting a lot of extra dollars on the table, in addition to the money I was already putting that was over the asking price, I figured, why not? I'm committed to it. Anyway, those little things can stand out. And in this case, it definitely did.
I feel like we're trying out for something every time, right? We're trying out for something or interviewing for something that you really want it. That waiting period of waiting after you put the offer in and you're waiting to see if they accept it or not. It's kind of one of those like, I hope they like me. I really want the house and this and that. There's been some times when they come back and you lost it and you feel like, man, how did I lose it? You never really know. I guess maybe eventually down the ride you can feel like, that I don't want to lose something over a few $100s or a stipulation or whatever it is onto it. But I think maybe that's down the road a little bit more as far as later podcasts. We talk about that a little bit more, but
absolutely. And we can jump into, I picked a high 5 questions that we can go through just to get an idea of, that we can ask everybody. And we'll go through a couple of different keys that I think would be useful. Pretty much anybody listening to the podcast can pull a little bit of value out of this. So we've covered maybe a little bit of this, but to backtrack,
I don't know. I feel like I'm on the spot right now.
Oh, here we go. Ready? Remember, these are yes or no answers, and you will be quizzed.
You gave me notes, but I've been drinking some beer, and I got my pickle here. And
all right, this is going to be a pretty difficult question. What was your first deal, and how did you get into it? We pretty much covered that. You found it on the MLS, and you had somebody that was helping carve the path for you to just help validate.
Yeah, it was on the MLS. I drove by it on my way home from work. It was the first day it was on MLS. I called the realtor guy, my realtor guy. His name is also Jeff, so it made it really easy for me. He scheduled a time. We went there. I put an offer. He put an offer in that night. They accepted it the next day. That was the house I bought. It was a small suburb outside of the Woodlands in like a Spring, I think is the city it's in. But like I said, it was $140,000. Paid $145,001, and I still currently have that house. It's my wife's favorite house.
Still have it, and it bought another house for you, and they're both going up in value, and they're both being paid down with payments somebody else is making.
Yep.
All right, so if you were starting, question number 2, if you were starting over today, what would you get into in terms of real estate investing, and why? This market, these conditions, knowing what you now know.
I'd probably do the same thing. I probably still would not go to commercial. I probably just think that the stage of my life, I'm not prepared to take on like a large quantity of things or an apartment complex or anything. I would still go in to a single family home. Like I said, I've been in self-storage for 8 years. So eventually I'd like to do that. But right now, if I was in the position I'm at right now, I'd probably still buy another house.
So to step to like the pieces you would do, you'd find an agent that is an investor agent. You would find maybe a community or some support structure if you wanted external validation. You would find a deal that makes sense, probably just off the MLS, that where the numbers seem about right. You would manage it yourself to cut down on your total expenses. And then you would validate your tenants using background checks. You'd call them, you check their employment, and then you just
rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat. I mean, I'm looking for at least $400 in cash flow. The very first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to figure out what my all-in is going to be, with taxes, insurance, and the property and the mortgage payment. And you can get most of that right off of MLS. I know exactly where I'm at, and I'll look to see what other houses in that area are renting for that particular thing. If the number makes at least $400, okay, so that's it, $4. No other property, or I'm not taking out capitals. It's just if it's $1,000 in and at $1,400, I'm going to take a good look at it, because I know that over time it's going to appreciate a little bit. My mortgage payment, unless I decide to make it change, is going to stay the same as far as the principal and everything. But over a period of time, I can also raise rents. I mean, if I raise rents $25 a year or every 2 years, it's going to make more money. So those are my minimums I'm looking for, is $400.
Isn't that incredible? Because once you lock in that financing, it state that if that $400 is true today, your financing costs stay the same. For those that don't know, when you lock in 30-year money, right, your payments stay the same. Now, ancillary expenses can go up. The tax rate can go up. The property value that's being taxed, that can also go up. You can have the cost of putting in a new air conditioning unit go up. You can have the cost of lumber, like is currently the case, go through the roof, right? You can have external factors, but the money cost stays the same. And so that delta plus the increase in rent just creates a wedge where over time, typically, if you buy in a good market, you're careful about the environment that you're in, location. You're in a market that's growing. There's obviously edge cases where you can get something in Detroit that ends up losing money. But for the most part, that's a pretty safe way to move forward. All right, so next question. What advice do you have for someone starting out today that you wish you knew when you got started?
That the inspection report is not something to be scared about, run away from, and think that everything has to be fixed. When I first got that inspection report, I freaked out. I'm like, oh, this house is freaking going to fall apart. It's done. And then so I did freak out on my real estate agent. I'm pretty sure I did. I'm pretty sure I called him and said, this thing's like 47 pages long and all this stuff is wrong. And I started making a spreadsheet of all the stuff I had to get fixed and what I was going to do. And then when it came down to it and we talked it over, there wasn't very much that really needed to get done. The inspection report is if you have a good inspector, it's very thorough and they have certain guidelines that they have to do. But I wouldn't be so scared of the inspection report. And I rely a little bit upon your other people and also your real estate agent. So that was one thing that freaked me out a little bit.
Great insight. Yeah, and that's where you fall back on somebody that's done it before. Yeah, every house has that issue. It's like, yes, it's
correct.
The thing you want to fix when you fix that thing, but don't worry about it generally. There's a lot of those sorts of things that come up on the report. That's great advice. What is another real estate or business podcast that adds value to your business that you'd recommend?
I haven't listened to a lot lately onto it. I guess I listened to an audio book recently. I know this is a little bit off topic, and like I said, I didn't plan for the questions that were going to happen for me. But as crazy as it sounds, I listened in the middle of listening to Matthew McConaughey's book. I'm not sure it's called Green Light, which I didn't think I would like, but my wife started listening to it, and I don't know. I was never a big Matthew McConaughey fan or anything, but just listen to it. The green light is what you're always looking for. You're looking for something to go, and just because you hit a red light doesn't mean that eventually that red light's not going to turn green. So don't let it stop you. So that's what I'm listening to right now.
And you recommend it? That's great.
I do recommend it. Yeah, it's kind of he's just a down home. He's rich, he's famous, he's got all this other stuff, but I feel like he's just a down home guy like us who got lucky. I mean, he didn't live a good childhood. He wasn't rich, and so he's just a guy that decided to do something.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Important, yeah. But just the overall preface, he says it almost every chapter. He's like, green light, and so everything that happened, he's like, green light. And then it says that's a red light. Red light, maybe stop, maybe wonder, but it always can turn. Red lights can always turn into green lights, And I'm only halfway through the book, so I ain't gonna pretend like I know everything about it. But it just popped in my head that if someone's listening and if you don't ever go on the green light, if you don't go, sometimes people behind you are gonna honk the horn at you, right? Come on, buddy, go. Get out of the way. You're slowing traffic down. Eventually you got to go.
Okay, last question. How can anyone listening add value to you? How do people learn more about you? Is there anything that you're looking for?
No, I'm really not. I'm not trying to have anybody add value to me. If anything else, just if people want to come on our show, I mean, this is something that we're going to try. We just want to talk to some average people. I think I talked about earlier that we want to listen to other people. We want to hear what their stories are. So if anything else, I think motivation, people doing something also motivates me to doing something, once you started getting into houses and buying houses, and like I said, me and Matthew never met. So this wasn't like we built a lifelong relationship together. And then in a family, we went to school or anything together. We just, but it's a motivational thing. Once you started getting into something, it got, gets your juices flowing again. I enjoyed talking to you and kind of sharing my experiences with you, whether they were right or wrong. I believe I was kind of hee-haw and whatever about it. I just kind of said, this is, I think the first meetup we were sitting in a Mexican restaurant with 6 or 7 other people. And I think I had 4 houses or 5 houses. I don't know, but it was kind of like, that's just what I did, guys. I don't know. I didn't over-examine anything. I just went and did it.
Which of course everyone was in awe about, by the way, at the time, because no, everybody else was looking at the bottom of the hill, looking to make that first step, right? That first leap. Right. And people were at different places, but just the action item on that was I think really important. And by the way, just from that conversation, a couple of us from that group did take action.
Yeah.
And a couple of us are now in it, just from from somebody else saying, "Hey, listen, I took a step from the lion's head, and there's actually a path here. You just have to take action."
Yeah, and I think that I kind of learned that from the storage industry, because I'd go to conventions and we talk about a lot. The storage industry is very open about sharing things that work, sharing ideas, not worried about giving information to your competitor, right? And although some people might think, well, yeah, if I tell him you tell him about it and he lives in the same area as you, aren't you basically just creating competition in already a very high competition world? Maybe. I don't know. Probably. I guess if you want to over-examine it. But I've also built friendships. I've also, later on down the road, there may be joint ventures with other people. I'm also building relationships with people more than I am creating competition for myself. There'll always be a house. I mean, we can look at it and I'm we could all say, oh, a house is too expensive. There's always going to be a house that'll make sense to buy. So that's not the problem. The problem is buying it.
Thank you for coming in and listening. Next time, we're going to have somebody that isn't one of us be the guest on the podcast. We're going to step into somebody that has gone from 0 to 1 and has been able to share some of their tips and tricks and the mindset that they had that would get them into the game and off the ledge. With that, I'm Matt Williams.
I'm Jeff Bateman.
Signing off.
Cheers.
Join us next time for another episode of the Texas Real Estate Podcast, your source for everything Texas real estate.